Support for WUWM podcasts comes from Potawatomi Casino Hotel Milwaukee, home to 24/7 excitement, dining, and an on-site hotel at 1721 West Canal Street. More information at potawatomi.com.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Today, we'll hear from Iranian students studying at UW-Milwaukee who support the U.S. military's action in their home country.
We're willing to pay this price, this cost, if it means we will get rid of the Islamic regime.
Then we'll learn how the federal crackdown on immigration has impacted undocumented people living in Milwaukee.
So she applied for asylum last spring. When I interviewed her in the fall, she still did not even have an interview for when she could plead her case, let alone any clue whether she would be granted asylum.
Plus, we'll join a group of seniors for their monthly social club meetup. All that's coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Thanks so much for joining us. The United States is at war with Iran. Oil prices have surged as the war now enters its second week. Iran has named the hardline Mojtaba Khamenei to succeed his late father as supreme leader. It signals defiance from Iran's leadership amid heavy U.S. and Israeli bombardment. WUWM's Mayan Silver talked with Iranian students at UW-Milwaukee about how their families are affected and why they support international intervention.
My name is Zara Fakhri, and I'm one of the officers of the Iranian Association. I'm also a PhD student at Lubar Business School, doing my PhD in management science. I'm second generation, so my parents fled from Iran in 1979 after the revolution, and we have never been secure to go back to the country in the fear of execution. But we have a lot of families, and my husband's family, they're living in Iran. I have a lot of relatives, and my grandmothers, they're living there.
The revolution Fakhri is speaking of was an uprising in 1979. It replaced Iran's 53-year-old monarchy with an Islamic republic led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini.
Since 47 years ago, we have had a lot of uprisings, but the most recent one and the most brutal one has happened almost 2 months ago. The country was under a blackout for more than 2 weeks, and almost around 40,000 people have been slaughtered on the street.
Fakhri is referring to the Iranian government's crackdown on and mass killing of its own people as they took to the streets in protest starting late last year. According to Amnesty International and many other human rights organizations, security forces fired at people, often targeting their heads and torsos. There were mass arrests, and Iranian authorities cut all internet access in an attempt to conceal their crimes. The number of dead is disputed, but estimates range from thousands to the tens of thousands that Fakhri mentioned.
So after that, there have been a lot of things going on. We most of us were not able to reach out to our family and friends inside Iran, have to be our voices for them, trying to do our best to inform all the non-Iranians and everyone outside of Iran what's happening there.
On February 28th, the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran, killing its supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Fakhri says she supports the military action. She says the Iranian regime is more deadly than the U.S. attacks have been.
We're saying that Islamic regime is more than 1,000 times worse than all the bombs that are coming to Iranian people.
My name is Paria Payami, and I'm studying PhD architecture. I'm a PhD student in architecture at School of Architecture and Urban Planning. I was the officer and president of Iranian Student Association for previous years, but now I'm not a part of this, but I'm supporting him. Yes. So I was born and raised in Iran. I lived my whole life there. I came to United States 4 years ago to study for my PhD. So all my family members, all my friends, my parents, my sibling, whoever I know, extended family is in Iran. I was about to say that I don't know any Iranians who lived inside Iran recently who opposes the overthrow of this regime, the war, or King Reza Pahlavi, or military action by President Trump. Everyone who was I had in contact with, my brother, my cousins, were asking, where is this help? Like, where is this promised help that is on the way when they are attacking? And now that they are attacking, they are all happy. They are cheering for them.
Critics of the U.S. intervention in Iran say the attacks were launched without congressional approval and are against the will of a majority of Americans. CNN reports that nearly 60% of Americans disapprove of the Iran strikes, and most think a long-term conflict is likely. But the Iranian students are hopeful that opposition figure Reza Pahlavi will take power. He is the exiled crown prince of Iran, who some Iranians see as a transitional leader to help the country towards becoming a secular democracy.
This is not just about one person. The whole system needs to go, and King Reza Pahlavi is the one and only leader of opposition that Iranians want and accept.
Payami says people shouldn't be opposed to this operation just because it's being waged by a Republican presidential administration and Israel.
People are entitled to have any opinion on their president, and that's okay. But if that becomes the whole identity and whole worldview of someone, to say whatever President Trump is going to do is going to be a failure, that's bad. Because if that mindset, if any ideology or mindset you have will make you a terrorist supporter, you need to reevaluate, revisit that decision.
My name is Nargis Khodadadi. I'm a PhD student in public health, and I'm the president of Iranian student organization. I left Iran in 2024. I came here in September 2024 to start my PhD, and all of my family and my friends are living in Iran right now. They were waiting for an intervention and help from outside of Iran, because it's not a political issue, it's about human rights. The children had been killed. The students, specifically women, were raped in the prisons, and regime killed people and then sell their body to their family. So obviously this is human rights, and people inside Iran want this intervention. And finally, U.S. and Israel supported them. So because of that, Iranian community are so thankful for this intervention.
The BBC and others reported that Iranian authorities have been demanding large sums of money from families to get back bodies of dead protesters. Earlier this week, Khodadadi lost her connection with her friends, but one called her through a direct phone line.
And he said, yeah, we can hear the voice, the sounds of the explosion. We see it every day, we feel it every day, but we aren't worried about them. We are continuing our regular life, our routine. But yeah, we can't go we can't go to shopping, or we can't go to restaurant. We have to stay at home. But everything is okay with us. We're willing to pay this price, this cost, if it means we will get rid of the Islamic regime. I understand that there are people around the world that they saying no war with Iran. I wanted to ask them, okay, what's your alternative? Are you caring about the human rights? If you care about them, so want the human rights for Iranian as well. Iranian themselves want to pay this cost and get rid of the Islamic regime.
Ultimately, the students feel that the Iranian people and their roughly 4,000-year culture will prevail. Here's Khodadadi again.
One of the things that we celebrate in Iran called Yalda, which is the first night of the winter. Since that night, the days are becoming longer and nights are becoming shorter. And we celebrate that night because this is a sign and a symbol of the light will overcome the darkness. So we value that and we celebrate that, and we hope that one day comes that the light overcome the darkness of the Islamic regime.
The students say the Persian community in Milwaukee is a close one, and they have several chat groups set up on Telegram and elsewhere to support each other during these times. Maayan Silver, 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
In Capital Notes this week, Maayan also covered the political impact the war on Iran could have here in Wisconsin. You can find that at WUWM.com or in the Capital Notes podcast feed. You can also listen to Lake Effect on demand as a podcast. Find it wherever you like to listen to podcasts, download, and enjoy on the go. Later in the show, we'll meet the members of a local social club for seniors. But first, a local writer joins us to share the stories of immigrants living in the Milwaukee area. That's coming up on Lake Effect on WUWM. You're listening to Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. Life as an immigrant is commonly clouded by fear and uncertainty. The federal crackdown on immigration this past year has only increased those feelings for immigrants living in our area. Freelance writer Barbara Miner wanted to share the lived experiences of some Milwaukee immigrants, who make up about 12% of our city's population. Her article in this month's Milwaukee Magazine shares the stories of DACA recipients to undocumented parents, asylum seekers, and more. Miner joins me now to talk about the piece and begins by explaining some of the challenges she encountered covering the topic.
Trying to find people was the first difficulty. Convincing people to talk was the second. And the third was crossing my fingers and praying at night that the people I did interview would not bail before the article came out, because this was the fall. This was ice. And people were justifiably very, very afraid.
With good reason, there's hesitancy to speak to media when it comes to this. So some people are referred to maybe just their first names, however they want to be most comfortable. And I want to talk about some of the profiles, and we'll start with Santiago. He's been living in Milwaukee for almost 30 years, along with his wife, Isabella. And he shared with you that right now, more than ever, of all of his decades living here, the reality of everything he built, the risk of it disappearing, is kind of front and center for him right now. How has he been viewing this current climate?
Well, the irony of part of the immigration story is that you have many politicians who are pro-family. The family is everything. Well, here you have, in effect, immigration policies that literally tear apart families. Because Santiago and his wife, these are pseudonyms, do not have papers. They've lived here 30 years. Their 2 children are DACA recipients, which means they're kind of in limbo, to use a Catholic term. They're neither permanently legal nor in, risk of being imminently deported. And 2 grandchildren who were born in the United States who are citizens. So Santiago says, listen, they can't do much to me anymore. If I have to go back to Mexico, fine. I'm older, almost retired, sell our home. We have a little money, little savings. He said, but I would never see my children or grandchildren again. And that's the really just heartbreaking realities of a lot of these policies.
The piece highlights several core truths of the matter. This is a widely spanning, very complicated issue. We're not trying to oversimplify, but one big truth is that our system is flawed, right?
Flawed is probably one of the
a nice
nicest
way to put it, yeah.
Kafkaesque, sort of broken. One of the things that I found fascinating in researching the article is that the most comprehensive immigration reform around undocumented people was under Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan actually supported immigration. And so Ronald Reagan, Mr. Republican, signed a bipartisan bill that gave amnesty to 3 million undocumented people. So to this day, in certain parts of the Latino community, Reagan is like their god. And so you have this Republican, pro-immigration, signed amnesty, Ronald Reagan, and then today, it is just yet another indication of how that Republican Party has been transformed. And there is not going to be comprehensive immigration reform without bipartisan support.
Correct. And to kind of lean into the gray areas, you also wrote about Jorge Franco, and he's the head of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce here in Wisconsin. And he leans into there's this truth, then there's this, there's this and this. So can you, while we're talking about the Republican Party and how that has either garnered support from the Hispanic community or not, Franco speaks on why there was an increased Hispanic vote for Trump in 2024. So can you share more kind of about the intricacies you were speaking with him?
Well, some of the intricacies were off the record because one of the things that I found fascinating was I wanted to talk to some Latinos who voted for Trump. And I had some contacts and friends in the Latino community, and they said, yeah, sure, I'll find some. Yeah, I know someone. And they'd come back and say, my friend doesn't want to talk. He's embarrassed. He barely will look me in the eye to admit he voted for Trump. And what they say, a lot of the Latinos, voting is private, as it should be, but a lot had to do with the economy. And, people felt an economic pinch, and they thought Trump might make it better. So the whole issue of who supports what parts and why and how is extremely complicated, and for businesses too, because these businesses rely on immigrant labor.
Yeah, not only do businesses rely on immigrant labor, Franco also estimated that there are approximately more than 20,000 Hispanic-owned businesses in the entire state of Wisconsin.
Yes, this is one of the many things I realized in doing this article how much I did not know. I'm college educated, postgraduate degrees. I consider myself a little bit informed. And every time I turned around, it seemed like there was some new fact I didn't realize. For example, you do not need a Social Security number to start a business. So you have very successful Latino Hispanic business people who may be undocumented.
So like we've been saying, this piece highlights several people to express their own truths in this complicated reality that they have to live in. And you talk to some dreamers, and I want to talk about Elena in particular. She grew up on the South Side where her neighborhood felt like family, but now she says, quote, I feel like we're losing that. Right now there's just a lot of fear, which is heartbreaking.
Very heartbreaking. And Elena, it was fascinating talking to her. She went to South Division, grew up on the South Side, went to Mount Mary. And she has a green card, which technically, and everything is technical and maybe an iffy right now, means she can, then apply for citizenship. Although in the last year, green cards have been revoked. And she knows that, and she's married to a U.S. citizen. She wants to have a family. She wants to get citizenship. She said, yeah, I used to speak out more, but not right now. I can't take the risk.
Well, in her family as well, her parents are both undocumented. And 4 years ago, they applied for U visas, which is a visa granted to crime victims for helping authorities. And this is a rough estimate, but estimates that it could take over 8 years for her parents to know whether or not they even get one.
And that's a lowball estimate.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the many things that I just was flabbergasted. For example, there's 185 different types of visas. You sometimes need a lawyer to know which one to even apply for. Lawyers are expensive. But let's say you're from Mexico and you want to apply for a visa to the United States, and you have sisters, brothers in the United States. So you apply for the sibling visa from Mexico. It's called F4. There's all these names and numbers. And there has not been an F4 visa issued to a Mexican since 2001, a quarter century ago. I mean, the system is irrevocable. Everyone knows it's broken. And as in so many other areas, Congress just has to get its act together and fix it. Well, they said, get in line.
Yeah.
There's no line to get into. Unless right now, if you're a white South Afrikaner, you can get in probably in a heartbeat. So you see the sort of racial and class biases that have always been part of the system, but they're just now out of control.
Well, on the note of the Afrikaners, one of many reasons someone may be staying in the U.S. is for asylum. And asylum applications and a lot of different type of visas, they have been decreased drastically under the current administration. And you share someone named Soraya's story. And she's only 28, but as you wrote, has already had a lifetime of experiences. Yeah. What's Soraya's background?
Well, she's Afghani. So that then and there, she's had a complicated life. Under the Taliban, then the Taliban wasn't in power, then the Taliban was back in power. And she comes from a minority population in Afghanistan, which right away kind of creates problems. She's a woman. She was educated at a university outside of Afghanistan, considered Western educated. And when it came time to think about going back to Afghanistan, her mom said, "You do not have a future here. You're from a minority. You are educated in a Western university. You speak English. You're a woman." So she is probably the epitome of the term grit and pluck because she just didn't give up. And she got a scholarship to attend UWM. And luckily, she graduated, it would be a year coming this May. She kind of got in under the wire of applying for asylum before Trump shut that down completely. So she applied for asylum last spring. When I interviewed her in the fall, she still did not even have an interview for when she could plead her case, let alone any clue whether she would be granted asylum.
And what are her hopes in the long run? I mean, she talked about how difficult it is to be away from her family, not even have the option to go see them again. And ultimately one day would love to return home, but who knows when that would be.
She misses her mother, I think, above all. And she has her hopes and her dreams, which would be the Taliban would be gone. She could return to Afghanistan. She could be with her family. But she also knows that that's probably not in the cards.
There was a lot of work and effort, I'm sure, that went into this. Do you want to share anything that didn't make it to the page or, connections that didn't come through or just things that stood out?
Maybe the tears as I tried. No, it was a very, very difficult article. It was interesting because I felt most concerned about Santiago and Isabella. They had the most to lose. And interestingly, I went with a good friend who's very fluent and bilingual. And he sat with me at the interview and, I recorded it. And the Milwaukee Magazine, to its credit, does fact-checking. They wanted Santiago's phone number to call him. And I said, I can't. I'm sorry. Because once a phone number goes into an email and, Milwaukee Magazine's part of Quad Graphics, I said, I just can't take that chance. And we went back and forth a little bit, and Chris Drosner, the editor, whom I like quite a bit, he understood in the end.
What do you hope your piece can help do for Milwaukeeans, both for those who are living in this moment as immigrants and for people who perhaps haven't had any personal connections with others' lived experiences?
Well, I think right now, understandably, the focus is on ICE. You have to prevent people from being snatched up off the street. But the real question is, how do we get to immigration reform? And there has to be, I think, Jorge from the Chamber of Commerce, he said, it's sort of like two prize fighters in a ring, and after a certain point, they just get tired. True immigration reform, people are going to say, listen, we have to come together. We have to figure out a way for amnesty for people who've been here 20, 30, 40 years. Sure, you want to protect the borders, but what does that mean? Because there aren't people streaming over the border right now. The real concern is the people who've built lives here, who are part of our community. Children are American citizens, maybe the parents aren't. You don't want to rip apart families. You don't want to destroy industries. You want to build upon what you have. And that's going to take bipartisan congressional action.
And that starts with learning people's stories.
Because fundamentally, in the end, it's about the people.
Barbara Miner is a freelance writer for Milwaukee Magazine. You can find her recent article, On Shaky Ground, that shares local immigrant stories in this month's issue. Still to come, we'll speak with a group of seniors who meet up for a monthly social club and what getting together means to them. Keep listening to Lake Effect on Milwaukee's NPR. This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. It can be hard for people of all ages to find genuine connection in an increasingly online world. That may be especially true for seniors. But Jane LeGolden might have cracked the code. 10 years ago, she started a meetup group for seniors, a happy hour once a month meant for older adults to make friends and find community. WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez visited the group last month and shares this story.
Hi, everybody.
Jane, how are you? Hi, Marianne.
I didn't mean not to sign up again. I really did. Okay.
Yeah, so here we are at Open Flame Restaurant in the bar area, and the members from the 65 Plus Happy Hour right now are starting to congregate, and they check in at the table here to be able to get a name tag. And they also make a donation for us to help keep the organization going through Meetup. And then everybody gets their cocktail and has a good time.
Hey, you have a new date? I see that you're with a handsome young man called Jimmy.
Yes.
And what are you expecting from tonight?
Oh, I'm expecting to have a good time. Everybody here just comes in and really just enjoys seeing everybody and possibly making new friends and getting together.
If you could just introduce yourself and tell me how old you are.
I'm Margaret, and I'm 71.
I'm Mike, I'm 70.
Hi, I'm Vicki Firstino, and I'm very soon to turn 80. Yes.
Okay, my name is Sue, and I'm going to turn 80 in a couple months.
My name is Mark, and I'm 76 years old.
He's a baby. I'm a cougar. We met here. We met in spring, May of 2020, and both of our spouses passed away in November, and within 3 days of each other, actually, and both buried at the same cemetery, St. Adalbert's, in his area where he'd always walk and do walks around, and he happened to come to meet up that one Wednesday, and that's how we met.
10 years, incredible. What's been bringing you back all that time?
There's such an eclectic group of people from all different backgrounds, but we're all creaky. Some of us are 400 years old.
It took me quite a bit of nerve when I first came here, and I thought about coming, and I didn't, and another month went by, and finally I did one time. Some people come with a friend. I came alone, and then I found the people to be so warm, and then I found out kind of why. Jane runs it well, but they had a name tag that they identify you if you're new. And so all these people were talking to me, and they're being nice and saying, "Oh, are you new?" And I thought, well, how do they know?
Well, what brought me here was that I was a flight attendant for 31 years. So in that job, you lose a lot of local people because I was gone all the time, all over the world. And I loved it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But a few years before I retired, so I've actually been coming here since I was in my 60s. But before I retired, I realized I need some friends. I need a life in Milwaukee.
What is something that you've gained from this group?
This time of year when you have seasonal affective disorder, which affects people our age more than I think anybody else. You just get that, I don't want to go anywhere, it's too cold, I'm too and you get the reminder every month, it's time for happy hour. Get off your daddy. Go.
It's a challenge, it really sucks. Because Well, just from the standpoint, I know many younger people who have aches and pains and this and that. Well, that just gets trumped up as you get older, and you can't be a sissy as you get older. You have to be tough. You do.
For me, it gave me hope, because at that time it was the dark side of my life, and I finally found people that I could share it with and move on in life and still remember the past.
Aging is, I try not to think about it. I'm very fortunate. I have not had a lot of issues, but I know a lot of people at 80s I'm not going to get better. I know that. So whatever. But no, it's a hard place to be, but when you have a group like this, it makes it so much easier.
You know, I was a flight attendant, but I'm very much an introvert, but nobody thinks that. So when I came in the door the first time, all I wanted to do was turn around and run. And I've heard many other people say that. It was like, this is too much. And at that time, there were only 40 or 50 people here. Now there's 70 to 100. But so bless the hearts of people that walk in the door now. They're brave. But I did see one person that I recognized, one person who's no longer with us, no longer with the group. And so I went over to her and I said, hi. And she didn't remember me. So I reintroduced myself. She kind of recalled me, and that one person helped me get through the first time I came.
Vicky is a tough broad. She's had cancer, breast surgery, and another cancer, and look at how beautiful she is.
What is a message that you have for other seniors or people that don't have groups or spaces like this?
I feel bad for people that stay home. I could easily do that. I've had a lot of illness since I retired. And you just have to pick yourself up by the bootstraps and walk out the door and gamble. Our lives are shorter when we're this age, so why not gamble and walk in the door and pray that somebody is going to be nice to you, and usually they are here, and you move on and you've got a whole new life. It's very sad to think of people staying home because there are opportunities here.
What I'm doing is I'm asking everyone to introduce themselves and to tell me how old they are.
Okay, I'm Jane LeGolden, and I'm 77, and I am the organizer of this group.
What was the impetus, or what was the spirit that made you want to start the group?
10 years ago, because it is 10 years ago this March that I started this group, I realized that a lot of my friends were moving away. I mean, Arizona, Florida, up north, Illinois, and I'm going like, I need friends. And one day I said to my daughter, I think I'm going to start a meetup group. And quite honestly, I went home, I poured myself a glass of wine, I sat down at the computer, and I started this group. And what's written out there right now is what I wrote 10 years ago. And it was basically, I wanted to meet people, have friends, and be able to do things.
And you've done that for so many people. One of my questions is, what has this group given to you?
It's given me, I feel like it's given me my life. I mean, of feeling alive and not being alone, and always knowing that I have somebody there whenever I want somebody. It feels so good to meet these people, and I didn't want to do a group where I had to read a book, knit a blanket, make something. I just wanted to meet people, so thus the happy hour. And it certainly isn't because we come here for the drinking or anything like that. It's to meet the people.
And then can you talk to me about your own moment of you had to make a decision if you wanted to keep doing this or not?
Yes, I have. And I have sometimes thought about not doing it because of some of the work that's involved in it. But then I sat one day and I actually tried to imagine my life without the group, and it didn't seem like that was the right way to go at all. And I don't think I will ever give up this group.
How close did you come when you were sitting with that idea of like letting the group go?
It took me months to make that decision because you actually register every 6 months to continue with the group with the meetup organization. And so after I did the time, I took the next 6 months to actually reflect and talk to people and try and decide. And when people keep thanking me for having the group and for what I've done, and they're so appreciative, and they're just so happy to be able to get together, it's hard for me to look away from that and not to do it. And more than that is, like I said, I finally actually sat almost an entire day and reflected what my own life would be if I didn't have the group. And so maybe it's selfish that I kept it too.
That story was produced by WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez. There are few places in Wisconsin that could claim as many discoveries as the Yerkes Observatory near Lake Geneva. The observatory is more than a century old and houses the world's largest refracting telescope. It's been visited by the likes of Carl Sagan and Albert Einstein. But it's more than just a place to study the stars. There's art, architecture, and sprawling gardens to enjoy there as well. To share more about what you can do in a visit there, Lake Effect's Becky Mortensen is joined by Walt Chaddick, the Director of Programs and External Affairs at Yerkes Observatory.
Let's start with the history of the observatory. It opened in 1897. What can you tell me about the origins of the observatory?
This was the brainchild of the astronomer George Hale. He got all this money from the guy who had built the L train in Chicago, which is crazy. Charles Yerkes got wealthy in those early days of public transportation in Chicago, and they needed to get away from the smoke of the factories. They needed to get away from the Industrial Revolution of Chicago. And back then, Wisconsin to Chicagoans was like Alaska. And so they were chasing clear skies. They knew city lights were on the way, and they needed to get up on this little ridge overlooking Geneva Lake. And they built this architectural masterpiece that would become the world's first graduate PhD program for this new field of study, astrophysics.
So we can't talk about the observatory without talking about the Great Refractor. So what can you tell us about this telescope?
It is a goosebump-inducing tube of joy that when people enter this giant dome that has remained this mysterious edifice for 130 years, they're overcome with childlike exuberance. I've seen it happen, y'all, over and over and over, and it happens to our staff. Every time you open these really loud vault doors, you're looking at what has remained the largest refracting telescope in the world. And what that is a lens telescope, as opposed to the newer style, which use mirrors, the reflecting telescopes. These lens telescopes are things of beauty. And the Great Refractor, right here in southern Wisconsin, is a 40-inch diameter couplet of lenses with a 63.5 to 65-foot long tube in this stunning dome. And it is working and used, and we use it for public observation and private research, and it is a sight to behold.
Yeah, you talked about the big dome, this big room, the floor moves. It's like this whole operation in there. So let's talk about some of the discoveries made because of the Great Refractor. What are some notable things that have been achieved at the Yerkes Observatory?
We can go through some neat ones. Like, you're talking about a who's who of noteworthy astronomers have passed through these halls. Edwin Hubble was there in the World War I era, so the 19-teens, and he wrote his doctoral dissertation called Photographic Investigations of Faint Nebulae. And in this is the early stages of him figuring out that the Milky Way was not the only galaxy. Y'all, we, until 101 years ago, thought that the Milky Way was it. Since then, we figured out there are probably at least 2 trillion galaxies. So when my grandparents were alive, they thought there was one galaxy. And because of the work of Edwin Hubble and others at Yerkes and later in California chasing clear skies, we figured out Andromeda was galaxy number 2, and we would go on to understand that there are 2 trillion. I would say the number one discovery at Yerkes, William Morgan in 1951 at Yerkes Observatory figured out the shape of our galaxy, the Milky Way. That shape, that spiral arm shape, was discovered in Wisconsin by William Morgan in 1951. Carl Sagan studied there. I would say Carl Sagan did something for astronomy that no one else had done before. He made it cool. Like, he was the hipster astronomer. He had blazers with elbow patches, and he wore turtlenecks year round and had that swoop skater haircut before Tony Hawk made that cool. And he did something incredible. He put astronomy on television. And the show Cosmos, watched by over 500 million people on public broadcasting, is the most watched show in PBS history. So when you think about Edwin Hubble, Carl Sagan, William Morgan, and then Gerard Kuiper figuring out everything on the other side of Neptune at Yerkes Observatory.
So let's talk about what people can see there today. There are a variety of tours that people can take at the observatory. Can you talk about what that experience is like?
We have tried to reimagine what a tour is, and tried to make it hilarious. That's one point. We've tried to be science communicators who are talking about architecture, because it's certainly an architectural masterpiece. We're talking about landscape design because we're an Olmsted site. We're talking about the history of photography, because at the same time photography was burgeoning, the telescopes were able to put cameras on them. And so the pictures of space beyond the moon that were taken for the very first time were taken at Yerkes Observatory. And so we have 180,000 glass plate pictures of space. So we show visitors those. We also are this really cool art center now, and we're collaborating with artists and making art ourselves that is inspired by astronomy. So there are pieces hanging in these neat corridors by Eric Carroll, the digital artist from Asheville, North Carolina. There's sculpture in the yard based on Einstein's field notes by Ashley Zelinsky, who was the official sculptor for the James Webb Space Telescope. So we're really obsessed with unexpected outcomes. What we are doing is a little performance, a little entertainment, a little education, some fantastic customer service, and just trying to have people leave going, that's not what I expected, and oh my God, that was so sweet.
Do visitors have an opportunity to look through the Great Refractor?
For sure. We don't do that in the daytime for obvious reasons, but typically every Friday and Saturday night from March to about Thanksgiving, we have public observing nights. There are only 12 tickets available for each of those nights. If it's clear, we're looking at as many objects as we can through the Great Refractor. So that's a really neat program that has been up and running for a couple of years now.
So you did mention the architecture. The observatory was built to be a place to study things that are far away, but the building itself is worth seeing. Can you talk a little bit about the architecture of the building?
You bet. Henry Ives Cobb, C-O-B-B, is our architect. He had built the University of Chicago's main campus down in Chicago. He built the Newberry Library, which is a remarkable bibliographical edifice, but he was just set free up on this 50-acre plot of land in Wisconsin. And this kind of Romanesque Beaux-Art hodgepodge of styles to match George Hale's astronomically based brain is a masterpiece in the Roman cross shape. It has 3 domes. It has this terrazzo marble floor and these marble walls that are just so soothing and calming. It has the Hagenal Rotunda that you enter, and he's using all these tricks of the eye in architecture that's called a trompe l'oeil. He's making you come in and look up at these skylights and these owls flying in their decorative columns, and it's just riddled with this ornamental sort of majesty that we'll see people outside, like even when we're closed, they're just looking at these columns and all of this Roman brick and terracotta for hours. And photography nuts, they love it. But just anybody who is into things that last, things that were made well, things that were cared for, is just totally digging on this Henry Ives Cobb architecture.
And beyond the building, the grounds are also quite beautiful. So can you describe what a stroll through the area around the observatory looks like?
Yeah, for sure. We've put roughly $20 million into the restoration of the building, but also the grounds. Now, we're a not-for-profit who is raising money from regular people, and we've just, by the skin of our teeth, we are just fighting tooth and nail to keep this alive. But it's more than just the observatory, as you say. It is a 50-acre plot of land. It was designed about 8 years after the observatory opened. Now they've got all the land ready to be landscaped, and the Olmsted brothers come in. Their dad was famous. He's Frederick Law Olmsted. Their firm had built Central Park in New York City. They built the U.S. Capitol grounds in D.C. and parks in Milwaukee, obviously, in Chicago, and university campuses across the country. And they designed Yerkes 50 acres. It was his oldest son, John Charles Olmsted, as the chief landscape designer. And since then, it sort of fell into disrepair, and our landscape committee and our staff have blazed about 4 miles of trails. Woodland trails, prairie trails, white pine forest trails, oak savanna trails. We've got 5 beehives in our apiary that's making honey. We have rain runoff systems into these native species ravines. We've worked with Jens Jensen Ecology out of Madison to do a pollinator prairie, and Roy Diblick out of Burlington, the North Winds Perennial Farm, to do all of these welcome gardens and sort of making this old prairie come back to life the way it would have been centuries ago. So that's all free, and you can just walk the trails before or after the tour, and there's site maps, and there's just a lot of interesting little things to see, not to mention that the observatory was built before cars. And so all of the professors who were famous astronomers lived in all the houses on the campus. So we have 2 restored homes where our visiting poets and scientists and musicians stay. But all these little houses are just full of, year after year, these brilliant scientists turning over and living in these homes. So it's quite a sight, y'all. It is not just a dorky science institute. There is a lot of stimuli happening.
So the Yerkes Observatory is a historic and beautiful place, but maybe there are some people who are just not that interested in astronomy. Why would you encourage them to pay a visit to the observatory?
This is a dynamic that I witness on a daily basis, that people after our tour say almost exactly what you just said. I wasn't interested in astronomy, and this was awesome. Because we're not giving a tour of the universe. We're not traveling to Neptune and talking about, the radial velocity of some star 20,000 light years away. This is about human achievement. This is about people. This is about an architect and masons and electricians who built a masterpiece. It's about landscape designers who got their hands dirty with their crews building an arboretum. This is about photography and the people who push the button to take the pictures. And it's about the context of humans within the study of astronomy. And so we see that every day, that people are just stunned, like, I didn't care at all about this, and my wife dragged me here, or my boyfriend, or what, my cousin. I can't believe I never knew about this before. And so that feeling that we have makes us as excited about that kind of visitor as we get when there's an astronomy nerd. Like, it's very fulfilling to, like, show this to the world.
Walt Chaddick is the Director of Programs and External Affairs at Yerkes Observatory. He spoke with Lake Effect's Becky Mortensen last summer. And that wraps up Lake Effect for today. I'm Audrey Nowakowski. If you've missed any of the show this week, you can find all of our conversations at wuwm.com. If you'd like to take us on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, we'll tell you about the upcoming state Supreme Court election and what's at stake in this race. Thank you so much for joining us today, right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.